Hi, DSH family. It is Kim Torres here coming with you with our Empowerment Through Education Thursday noon workshop. And today we are going to be discussing IQ testing and whether you should allow your school to IQ test your kiddo or not. It is one of the most asked questions that comes my way over the years of disability advocacy work. And today we're going to be discussing the topic based on my experiences working with other parents, being the parent of a child with an intellectual disability, and being a former public school teacher. So nothing that you're going to get today is considered law per se. I'm going to read you one section of law, and it's not me coming in and telling you exactly what is the right answer for you. It's just me sharing some tips and advice on whether you should allow the school to IQ test your kid. So the very first place we probably should start, and I apologize that I'm coming to you with headphones on today, but we have various meetings going on in our house, from my husband to my kids to me. So this is the easiest way to make sure you hear me and I hear myself, is we really need to discuss why schools are so adamant that IQ testing take place. So under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is the federal law that guides our special education services, under IDEA, schools are required to test in all areas of possible disability when testing for qualifications of special ed. So when a school looks at our kiddos with Down syndrome, what they are thinking is there is a possibility that this child has an intellectual disability, and therefore I need to test for it, because the law says I need to test for all possible disabilities, okay? So then if we go back to IDEA, hey Myra, when we go back to IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, okay, and we go to section 300.8, here's that one legal reference I'm going to be giving you today. When we go back to there where they define what an intellectual disability is, I'm going to read it to you. They define an intellectual disability means a significantly sub-average general intellectual functioning. So significantly sub-average general intellectual functioning existing concurrently with deficits in adaptive behavior and manifested during the developmental period that adversely affects a child's educational performance. Woo, big definition. So there needs to be significant sub-average intelligence. There needs to be adaptive behavior deficits, and the intellectual disability must be manifested before the or during the developmental period. Okay, so technically Down syndrome is going to fit into that. So schools are going to say, I'm required to test in all areas of disability. I'm pretty sure that this kiddo with Down syndrome has an intellectual disability, so therefore I must IQ test this kiddo. And then they send home a paper to you and they want to IQ test your kiddo from the age 3 and up. So they want to do a full-fledged IQ test. Now, IQ tests come in many shapes and forms. There's different manufacturers of them. There's verbal and nonverbal IQ tests. In general, though, based on my experiences with IQ tests, my experience as a teacher, and then my experience with working with parents of other kids with Down syndrome, in general, our kids do pretty poorly on an IQ test. And that really the poor quality of the results of the IQ test aren't always related to their intellectual disability. sometimes it's related to their attention problems associated with Down syndrome. Sometimes it's related to their generalization inabilities to take the knowledge that they've learned in the classroom and apply it to this test with this different person who's never sat down with them ever in their life before and now wants to sit down and take this extremely long test, and they can't apply the skills they already know because they've never been in a situation like the IQ test before. And so there's a lot of factors that I personally feel sway an IQ test for at least my son and many of the kids I've met with Down syndrome to be lower than what their real intellectual ability may or may not be. So the question is then, what do you do when a school comes in and says, I have to IQ test your kiddo? You have to give me consent. If without the IQ test, your kid cannot be in special ed. Okay? And I'm going to give you a couple of options of things that I have done, that other parents have done in this process. So the first option is you can say, sure, IQ test. I actually did that this year, believe it or not. I sat down with the school and I said, here is why I don't agree with your IQ test. Here's what I don't like about it. Here is what your data is going to show. And here's why I don't think it's going to be a benefit. But you go ahead, you do that IQ test. I must say I have a trusting special ed team now that I trust isn't going to make any major changes to his IEP based on this one test. And I let them test. Now I'm going to go on a side tangent here for just a second because I said something that's really important that you should be aware of, that no school, no IEP team can make a decision on your child's placement or goals based on one test. So the IQ test in and of itself should not be grounds for anything other than your kid qualifying for special education. So in the ideal world, it really wouldn't matter whether you IQ tested or not, because the IQ test would qualify, the score would come back, there would be a significant sub-average general intellectual ability. So your child would qualify for special ed under intellectual disability, and then the IEP team would sit down and they would forget about that. There would be no discussion about that label of an intellectual disability. Instead, the discussion would be focused on what their present levels of academic achievement and functional performance are. There would be goals written based on that, and then their placement would be determined based on their goals. That's ideal. I'm telling you that ideal doesn't always happen. And in many schools, once that intellectual disability label hits, that's when they automatically assume there's an intellectual disability, they need to be pulled out into a self-contained classroom. And they're making a connection between two things that the federal law never intended to be the connection. Myra's asking, is there a way we could get a copy of the verbal test that we could do ourselves? I don't have a copy of a IQ test. Typically, if you Google search it, you're not going to get a copy of it either. If you can find someone that has that psychology background and is willing to share some tidbits for you, that would be the easiest way for you to get a better understanding of what that test is. To keep the test valid, they don't typically just post it out. It's same as like the STAR test or any, graduate school admissions test. They don't post them out for people to see, to maintain validity. So back to where we were at is that the test results, the IQ test results, shouldn't equate to placement. Oftentimes those schools do that. They say, oh, got a low IQ, must be in a self-contained special ed class. And so a lot of times what us moms do is option number 2 is we deny IQ testing. I've done that as well. I have denied IQ testing all the way up until this year when my son is in 3rd grade. And we would, on the paper they send home where they ask if you are giving consent for tests, I would just check off, yes, I'm consenting to test except for, and then I'd write me a little sentence out there that said I am not consenting to a full IQ test. And so typically I would work with the school and allow them to do portions of the IQ test that we both agreed would be very helpful to understanding how Hayden's brain functions, but that we would not put together an entire IQ score. The school was typically okay with this, and they felt like they were testing for all possible disabilities, including this intellectual disability, which we defined as significantly sub-average general intellectual functioning, because they were getting to do portions of the IQ test. And then we also did what was called a developmental profile. We did 3, there's a couple of numbered DP2, DP3. You can Google developmental profile. It is a test that is more play-based, in my opinion, more appropriate for our little guys and gals with Down syndrome. And so my school was willing to work through that process with us. There are schools, though, that are not willing to do that median ground area. And so the parent will say, I deny IQ test, will not do it. And then the school says, well, then your kid can't be in special ed. And then there's this stalemate of what to do. And it's a tough one, but my suggestion is to go back, if you have that relationship with your school, and to go back to the law. Yes, I understand that you need to test at all possible disabilities. I understand that an intellectual disability means a significantly, and I would read it straight from the law, significantly sub-average general intellectual functioning existing concurrently with deficits in adaptive behavior and manifested during the developmental period. I understand that. But nowhere in any of those situations does it say that an IQ test is required to meet those needs that you're required to meet. Sometimes states will come back and say, well, our state law requires us to IQ test. And then that's where I would say, well, then show that to me, because I haven't found that yet. And still haven't found anything that says that anybody in Texas is required to give an IQ test. Then sometimes you'll get somebody that says, well, our district requires an IQ test. Well, again, show that to me in writing. Where is it required that there be an IQ test? Can't you test for significantly sub-average general intellectual functioning with some different type of tests or some combination of tests without having to give the full IQ test? A lot of times the answer is qualifying your kiddo using OHI, which is a different qualification code called other health impairment. Hayden, my son, was qualified for special ed under OHI for many, many, many years because I always denied IQ testing. Again, it goes back to the fact that Down syndrome is not the qualification mechanism for special ed. In order to qualify for special ed, you have to meet one of the written definitions in the federal law. Typically, that's an intellectual disability, but our kids also qualify under other health impairment, which, let's see, let me scroll down here and I'll read that one for you. Let's see. Oh, they qualify under speech and language impairment too. Other health impairment is defined as having limited strength, vitality, or alertness, including a heightened alertness or environmental stimuli that results in limited alertness with respect to the educational environment that is due to chronic or acute health problems and blah, 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 blah. And then so a lot of those chronic and acute health problems that are listed in other health impairments are the related diagnoses that all of our kids have because they are so common with a Down syndrome diagnosis. So our kids don't have to have an intellectual disability qualification to get special ed. They can qualify under OHI, they can qualify under speech and language. And then from there, remember we talked about earlier that it's not an issue of here is their qualification, here is the services they're going to get. It's here is their qualification. Now let's set that aside somewhere else on the table and let's start the IEP process from scratch. Let's look at what they can do and what they can't do. Maybe their IQ test score was super duper low, but maybe they're just a rock star student and they're achieving higher than their IQ says they can in school. Let's look at that and let's create an IEP and goals and a plan based on that data. If there's anything you take out of this workshop today, that is the most important part, that the qualification code, the thing that the IQ test is designed to find this intellectual disability, only affects their ability to get into special education. From there, it's almost a piece of the puzzle that just needs to be set off to the side so that you can then write an IEP based on their unique needs at that time. Let's see here. I'm going to look back at a couple of comments here. Efren says, my son doesn't fit in their boxes. He's so bright but stubborn and won't respond to anything if he doesn't want to. Completely understand. And that's part of the reason why I typically denied IQ testing, because I could test my son on cooking, which he does a cooking show for y'all every Monday night. And because it's a test, he's going to fail it, because he's stubborn and he doesn't want to do it. It doesn't have anything to necessarily say about his ability to cook. It's his want and will to actually do the test. So back to the question, should you IQ test or should you not IQ test? And the answer is it really depends. I've done it both ways. I feel like that not IQ testing was what we needed to do when we weren't IQ testing, and I feel like IQ testing this year didn't hurt us at all. What I would say though is the key to making this decision work is you have to have a working relationship with your school in order to be able to have a conversation, to be able to let them see that there is some gray area in the way that these laws are written in order for them to excuse your son or daughter from IQ testing. The relationship has to be there. Every time I've ever worked with a parent who went in guns a-blazing, wanting to, sock it to the school and say, you don't have to IQ test me, every time it's always come back with ends up in a stalemate fight. And so building that relationship and understanding that there is some gray area in there that could be interpreted one way or the other on whether IQ testing is needed is very important. The other thing I would say is that there is a moment in time where all of our kids must have an IQ test, okay? And this is the second and most important thing that you've talked about today. When our kids become adults, if we want them to receive the Medicaid waiver services that we are going to want them to receive because they are worth lots and lots of money, there's free services, reduced cost services available for us to help raise our kids from adulthood on. If we want access to those, there has to be proof of an intellectual disability. And so there is some point in time in which you have to let the school or your therapist or somebody do that IQ testing. Some of my best friends plan on waiting till their kid is 16, 17 years old and then getting that IQ test. Us, on the other hand, we waited till 9. Now we have proof that there is an intellectual disability. We'll probably let the school IQ test again 3-6 years, depending on need. And then that will allow us to have access to these Medicaid waiver resources as an adult. The resources that are only available to people that have that low IQ score and that intellectual disability label. So it is a double-edged sword many times. There are reasons to not IQ test. It's not always the best test for our kids. It typically only proves to schools what our kids can't do. And then there are reasons to IQ test. One being to qualify for these services that are not available to us unless there is a proven track record of an intellectual disability. So that was your 10, 15, 20 minutes. Wow, I went 20 minutes of information on the beloved and always complicated IQ test. I really, really, really hope that each of you does some research on these. And if you need help, we are here to help you understand IQ testing better. We are here to help you articulate your needs to the school on whether you want or do not want to IQ test. All you need to do is go to our website at www.dsah and click on the Contact Us button. It's the easiest way to reach us right now, since we are obviously all working from home with my kids in the background view. And we will reach back out to you and get you some information. Have a great day, and we will see you next week. Bye, guys.